Hello, everyone, and hello, Tim.
Hey, John.
Thanks for joining me today. For those of you who are watching, this is the very first installment of a podcast series we're going to be doing out of the district office. I'm calling it Soup of the Day. Basically, it's superintendent having conversations with current topics that are related to local church health, local church development, pop culture, news, things of that nature that are coming down that affect all of us as church leaders. And so, Tim, thanks for joining me on our very first one.
Thanks for the invite.
I woke up this morning and I was hoping that I would find a crashed F-35 in my backyard. I don't know if you saw the news last night. Okay, so they were searching for this F-35. The pilot bailed out, and the plane went in autopilot mode. They called it zombie mode, and it just flew, and they had no idea where it was going. And so they were actually asking people around the nation to help locate.
Is it a U.S. military plane?
Yes, wow. This $80 million fighter aircraft. And so I was hoping, that I would be famous for a day.
I feel terribly uninformed.
I know.
The whole world is looking for this airplane.
Where's your pop culture?
I was watching the football game last night.
Okay, well, I was watching the news. Excuse me. Anyway, so you and I had a brief conversation just about some of the things that have been going on, and one of the things that I had posted recently on social media was an unsolicited rebuttal to Alex Lang. Alex Lang is a Presbyterian minister that published the article on why I'm leaving the church, and it went viral in our church communities. And I think last count it was almost 400,000 views on that article. And he had some really profound statements on why he was leaving, and it has really resonated with a number of our ministers. I've had several conversations over the last several days. Just about those that are feeling some of the same ways. Yeah. And so with your background, and for those of you who don't know, Tim is a licensed marriage and family therapist, in addition to be an ordained Assemblies of God minister, pastored several churches and numerous years of experience in ministry. And so walked through a lot of what our guys are walking through now, and resonating very well with what this young pastor, Presbyterian minister, was saying about some of the reasons that he was leaving. And one of them was, and we just want to talk about unrealistic expectations of ministers today. And so that was a pretty profound statement that he would make, that because we go into ministry with certain expectations of things that we are going to accomplish, and we kind of hit that brick wall of societal demands and expectations on the pastor and the pastor's spouse and his family and those type things. And so how do we as leaders in the church set reasonable expectations on ourselves and kind of keep at bay some of those unrealistic expectations that the church may place on our shoulders?
Yeah, that's a great question. Many of us who have felt a call to ministry, that call to ministry was informed by some example, right? Somebody that we looked up to, a minister, a pastor, maybe the pastor of our own church growing up, or maybe it was a prominent public minister, right? And that's a part of our calling, as we were inspired by them and their work and what God had called them to do. But now we come to ministry and we see that as a template for us, and I've got to somehow live up to that. And those are big shoes to walk in, often. And because all of us are individuals and our calling is unique, when we try to live up to that, it's like David wearing Saul's armor, right? And it's ill-fitting and doesn't work out, and it ends up being a burden to us that's really hard to carry. So I think that's an issue for a lot of pastors, is just kind of understanding, I am who I am. God's called me to do something unique, something that fits who I am, and not trying to be somebody else, right? Yeah. And that somebody else can be somebody that we grew up kind of looking up to, or it can be even somebody in pop culture, right? I mean, certainly in our social media age, we are bombarded with 10-minute clips, or 30 to 60-second clips of the most inspiring little snippets, and it's like, that's what I've got to be, but that's not who I am. I got to be me.
How do you, as a minister, establish realistic expectations of yourself in light of all the pressure on social media?
Yeah. Full disclosure, I do that poorly. I feel that pressure myself, right? And and suffer by comparison to those that I see on social media. So I feel that the pressure of that within myself, even as I'm answering this question.
Right.
What I try to remember is, number one, that's somebody's highlight reel, right?
Exactly.
And so nobody lives there in that place of the 30-second clip or the 60-second clip, right? Mm-hmm. Also, most of those ministers on social media have a makeup artist, and they have a full lighting crew,
Yes,
and they have a professional studio, and they can do multiple takes. You know, often there's 3 or 4 services, and they'll take the best cut from.
Yep.
And a lot of us don't have those resources, so I need to be compassionate toward myself,
Yes.
and just understand that that's unrealistic to think that I'm going to be able to approximate that in my own ministry circumstance. I think the harder part is that I can kind of convince myself of that, but the reality is I can't have that conversation with everyone in my church and go, hey, this is why what you're seeing from me on Sunday doesn't match that, because they've got all these things. And dealing with people's perception of that and people's comparisons of that, which gets back to trying to win people's approval, right? That's a different piece, because people's approval is harder, I think, than ever to gain because of what they're seeing and the comparisons they're making.
Yes.
And so it's harder than ever to kind of release that and say, you know what, I can't make people's approval my goal. And I'm not in the ministry to try to please them. I'm in it to please the Lord.
Well, and you are 100% correct that our approval comes from Jesus. And yes, we want to do our very best. Like every Sunday, it's Super Bowl Sunday. We want to minister to our flock. We want to encourage them. We want to disciple them. We want to draw in new believers. But we be the best version of who we are. Mm-hmm. And I think that is really the key, is that we know ourselves as a leader, being balanced and being self-aware and saying, all right, here are my strengths. Yep. Here are my weaknesses.
Yep.
I can't be this guy because I don't have those strengths.
Yep.
But there's some truth in the fact that he can't be me because he may not have my strengths.
100%.
And so, he's on a much larger platform and it has a much more profound ministry. But I think that we have, in some ways, adulterated the goalposts of success in that, well, I've got to have that. I've got to be on that platform so that I can look at myself in the mirror and say, yeah, I'm doing it right, or I'm doing it well. And that's not the goalpost. The goalpost is, and this is the same calling we all have, and this is what I'd love to tell every young minister out there that are coming up now, because there are societal changes and mindsets that have changed. 150 years ago in America, the minister was the celebrated and venerated individual in the community or in the village. The word parson comes from an early version of the person, which meant the person was the minister in the village, in the community. And so he was the guy that you went to for advice. He was the guy that handled and mediated problems in the community. He was the guy that was the most educated. He was the one that handled the thing. He was the parson. He was the person.
Right.
Fast forward to 2023, and ministers are not that individual in the community by and large.
Right.
And then we've had some very profound moral failures that have been played out in the news and in the media and whatnot. And so that depiction of the minister in the local community has diminished over the years. So we're fighting against that as well.
Yeah.
So we've got that on one side. We've got unrealistic expectations on the other. The real answer is, am I pleasing Jesus with my life in ministry?
Right.
That's what it has to be.
Right.
It has to be about, am I being the best version of who I am? Now, that's really hard to do. Mm-hmm. And so, as the marriage and family therapist, speak to this guy right here who struggles with insecurities. We all have them. I don't care how secure you tell yourself. There's some area of your life that you may not have completely shored up. And so how do we sit down and have frank conversations with ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, this is an area that you need to shore up or strengthen.
Right. Yeah. I love that. Thanks for your vulnerability around that. You heard me share this in another context the other day, but if we're ever feeling discouraged, as that pastor was who posted that letter, first of all, we've got to remember our calling, right? We're called to this. And in that,
yes,
God chose me for a reason. Right, I'm this bundle of strengths and
He does
weaknesses
not
and insecurities,
make accidents,
and
yes.
yeah, and He chose me for a reason, and so I want to lean into that. Right? He didn't choose me because He was hoping that I would be somebody else. He chose me for who I am, and so got to take some comfort in that and some encouragement in that. And I think also, not only remember our calling, but return to our calling. What is it exactly that God's called me to do? Because we start out in ministry with a pretty clear sense of that. And then based on what other people are doing and what's being celebrated in the church world and in the culture, we kind of take on all these other things. And in that letter, he's saying, this is what it is now to be a pastor. And I would say, what it is to be a pastor is what it's always been, right? At its core,
Right.
is what it's always been.
100%.
We've added all of these other things to it. And so we've got to get back to the just simple sense of what is it that God's called me to do here? And what does it look like for me, this person,
Yes.
to do that? Man, I think that takes a ton of pressure off when we do that.
it does, and it levels the playing field.
Right.
So if I am one of the most influential individuals in my community, whether I am on a platform of that size or not is irrelevant.
Yeah.
If I have the influence, so if you're in a community of 5,000, but your church is running 200, and you have incredible influence in your community, I would say that you guys are operating on the same plane. Mm-hmm. And so you may not have a social media presence, and you may not have the lighting package and the, full-time, media pastor or whatnot. Excuse me. You may not have those things, but you have incredible influence, and you're bringing glory to the name of Jesus.
Yep.
And let me throw this caveat in there too as well. I hold genuine heartfelt sorrow for that pastor who wrote that article, because as I was reading it, I was reading a cry. That here is a brokenness about this article. And my heart broke for him.
Right.
And so there's no criticism at all. You don't understand what somebody's going through until you walk a mile in their shoes.
Right.
Okay. And so we don't understand the internal conflicts and everything that is happening in his life and everything that's going on in those things. And so I hold genuine, heartfelt sorrow and compassion towards him. So this is not some autopsy on his life and ministry, but I do believe that we can take what he has said and apply it to ourselves. And are we vulnerable in any of these areas?
Right.
Is my ministry vulnerable? Talked about the unrealistic expectations, but then also you mentioned earlier just about being the perfect shining example of Jesus in every capacity and area of our lives. And boy, that is unrealistic.
Yeah. Can I jump in there? You had just shared your compassion for this pastor and what he had been going through, that the weight had become so heavy that he says, you know what, I'm out, right? And I feel that compassion too. But what I'm noticing is in writing this letter, right, there's this, I don't think I can bear this anymore, but he felt like he needed to justify or explain why this was the right decision for him. And you can almost sense how conflicted he is about it.
Certainly.
It's like, I don't know how to go on as I've been. And yet at the same time, this doesn't feel good for me to make this step. And so I need to explain it. I need to justify it. And the danger is that his justification or explanation of what he's been through and the decision that he's making almost comes across as hey, you should consider this too.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a real danger. If other ministers don't just read that and go, okay, other people have felt the way I felt, that's a good thing.
Yes,
right.
yes.
But if they read that and go, okay, he feels the way I do and he's out, hey, and that would fuel their fire. We all feel that, right? Sure. We all have Mondays where we go, I don't know if I should be doing this.
Did I sign up for this? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did I really sign up for this?
And the danger is that, that kind of full explanation of why I made this decision, that gives another pastor who's just simply discouraged and he'll feel better on Tuesday, gives him kind of a framework, right?
Certainly.
A framework for, this is why this is a good decision. And I think that's a really dangerous thing.
It is.
We want to say to every pastor that's out there, you are called and God has his hand upon your life, and discouraging moments or even seasons are a part of following that call. But we want to say, hang in there, remember your calling, return to your calling, and reach out for help, because we are here. We want to come alongside and lift you up and resource you and do whatever we can to help you to hang in there and keep doing what you're doing. Don't quit.
Well, absolutely, Tim. And I couldn't have said it better. there are hard and difficult seasons of ministry. If it was easy, the old saying, everybody would do it.
Right.
And he doesn't call people who aren't capable. You are capable. Pastor, I want you to know, he didn't call you by accident, and you're not in the place that you're in by accident either. So whatever capacity that you're serving in, if you say yes to wherever Jesus is leading you, that's exactly where you're supposed to be.
Right.
And it may be a very difficult situation, and it may be, circumstances may be aligning themselves to make life and ministry difficult. But number one, those don't last. There are better seasons to be experienced in ministry, and you don't want to quit in the middle of those. You want to, and I know my life. I've been in very difficult seasons of ministry, and it's easier to quit than it is to persevere. There's a lot of things that sharp people can go do, and the world may be trying to entice you to come do something different.
Right.
You can go and do this and pursue this career or whatnot. But I want to encourage you that God called you to please Him with the life that you're in right now, and how that looks, I know sometimes varies. I mean, I've done missions work, and I've done church work, and I've done district office work, and so God kind of morphs what your calling looks like in different seasons, but you're always going to have those moments of difficulty. Now, what I would caution all of us on is using condemning language with people who are considering quitting.
Right.
Okay? There's that, man, you just need to tough it out. You need to suck it up and be a man, and all that language that is incredibly unhealthy for leaders. And I'll say that there have been times when I've been guilty of subscribing to some of that. The grit factor. Come on, we're Generation X, okay? We were the latchkey generation. We were the last generation without the internet. We had to figure life out, okay? And I'm not saying that we had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to school, but what I am saying is that there is that mentality of you don't go to the doctor when you get a scratch, okay? And life was different. I want to caution us against using language like that, because it can quickly turn into condemnation and become a tool of the enemy.
Right.
And so the enemy is always at work, and sometimes he uses people to execute his agenda.
Right.
And so there may be language that we're using that the enemy can say, and well, here, look, your peers, or even your peers are condemning you. Even your peers don't think you're enough. And we want to caution ourselves on that, because we absolutely need to be building each other up and saying, yes, you are in a difficult season, but you're not alone.
Yep.
People understand where you're at.
Yeah.
And what can we do to encourage you?
Yeah. And I can even see the compassion in your eyes right now when you're thinking about those pastors that are thinking about quitting, and how discouraged they would be by somebody just saying, hey, just gut it out. Right.
Yeah.
And I want to just speak to that for a second, because I think that when people say that, hey, toughen up, right? What that ends up doing is it reinforces this false dichotomy that your two choices are keep doing what you're doing in discouragement or quit. Those are the only two options. How about you continue in your calling, but learn to do it in a healthier way, right? By reaching out for some help. That's episode 2. Yeah.
We're gonna talk about that. But 100% correct.
Yeah. Because you don't have to go on like you are. That's this pastor in this letter was essentially saying, I realized if I was going to do this, this is what it was going to look like, and I don't want to do that. I would agree. I'd say, man, you're taking on all of these burdens that you're not meant to bear. You're trying to live up to all of these expectations that Jesus doesn't have for you, just people have for you.
Yes.
And so how can you continue to pursue your pastoral calling, but do it in a way that's more aligned with what God originally called you to do, what's more aligned with a more balanced and healthier life?
Man, Tim, you are 100% correct. There is a wrong way to do ministry, but there are a multitude of right ways to do it. And so we know all the wrong ways, but there are a myriad of good ways to do it, and healthy ways to do it that are life-giving to you as the individual, life-giving to your family, life-giving to your congregation.
Yeah.
And so I would say that there is a lot of power in the word no.
Yeah.
When you are asked to do something that is really unrealistic. And I also get the pressure of not feeling that you can't say no, because you are the shepherd of the flock, and you've got a sheep that's out there, and we leave the 99 and we go to the one until we find them. Okay, sometimes that one out there, and not being too critical, but sometimes that one out there is out there by their own decision making, and they need to be brought back. But the fourth time that they're out there, they need to be locked in the pen, and so you're burning all this sideways energy on things that sometimes the word no would serve you well and serve the purposes of the church well at the same time.
Yeah. Sometimes we have to just be able to say no, and often there's a third option between yes and no. It's yes, but not right now, right? Because this time is set apart for my wife and our date night, or not right now because I need to make sure that my kids know that they're most important in my life, more important to me than my church work, or what it is that you're expecting of me right now. Maybe it's yes, but not in the way that you're expecting me to do it. Yes, I want to be able to care for you and serve you in those ways, but not to get your approval. I'm going to do it in a way that really is what God's calling me to do, that may not fully satisfy your expectations of me, but you know what? That's what God's called me to do. So I do care about you. I'm going to serve you. I'm going to serve this church, but I'm going to do it in a way that's authentic to me.
Absolutely.
And that's aligned with God's calling on my life, not your expectation of me or what's going to win your approval.
And I am willing to admit, and my girls can testify to this, that if I had to do it over again, I would have done it differently. Early in ministry, being very driven, very goal-oriented, very get it done.
Are you kind of relaxed now? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know about that, but
I'm
experiencing
doing better. More relaxed, John.
I'm doing better. Thanks for calling me out right there. I'm doing better.
We can edit that out.
And again, personal disposition, wiring, temperament, all those things play into that.
Sure.
But given my upbringing and those things, it wired me a certain way, and it was very result-oriented.
Right.
And I won't go into all the psychology of it, but basically, feeling this unrealistic need to prove my worth.
Right.
And so that led me to be way more driven than I probably needed to be, not probably actually needed to be. And so the people around you are the ones that pay the price. And so having to try to fix that a little bit and to repair some of those things have been very difficult. But God is so good and gracious.
Yeah.
And so I would say to the minister that's listening right now, man, you can be a go-getter and you can be driven and you can be goal-oriented and you can be task-oriented. For me, as a hard melancholy, everything's a box to be checked. And so I'm checking boxes all day long. I got to do this, just to click, 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 click. And everything was a task. That's not the way you're supposed to operate.
Right.
And learning that, and many years of counseling and all those other things, just understanding you can't be that way because the people around you pay the price.
Right.
For it. And so I would, like I was saying earlier, I would say to that minister that it is wired that way, goal-oriented. Man, this church has got to be growing. We got to, hit this benchmark. We got to do those things. Yes. At the same time, we rest in the Lord.
Yeah.
And we trust Him for the growth. And this is what I would tell anyone that's leading a ministry. If you think you're doing it, if you really think you're the one doing it, I got news for you.
Right.
Okay, here's some shocking revelation.
Right.
Jesus does it.
Yeah.
Now, He's using you as the tool to bring about His vision and His plan for the ministry or for the community you're ministering in. He needs your obedience and your faithfulness.
Right.
But you're not doing it.
Right.
Jesus is doing it.
Yeah. And I was teasing you there for a minute, but I love your vulnerability around that, to just say, hey, I'm on a journey here of kind of understanding myself and understanding these things that drive me. And I would just say, man, many of us, because I'm in that category a little bit too, a high percentage of our ministers are people that their sense of self comes from what they do, what they accomplish, or their sense of self comes from what other people think of them, right? So we're driven by either accomplishment or by people's approval, right?
Yep.
And I would just say to ministers like ourselves that struggle in those ways, that's part of why God called you to it. God is harnessing that thing in you. In our weakness, He is made strong, right?
Yes.
God takes us, all of that, including our weaknesses, and says, you know what, I can take that and I can use that for my glory. Now, we don't want to just give that full reign in our lives, right?
Right.
We want to understand that how God sees us and what it is He's called us to, and so we don't want that to become an unhealthy thing that's driving in a way that is really harmful to us and to our family and our relationships. But to just go, you know what, God knows that's a part of me, and God is using that for His glory, and I just need to be self-aware about that and make sure that it doesn't become outsized in my life or in my ministry.
Absolutely, Tim. Absolutely. Growing up in the school of leadership that I emerged under, it was a very unhealthy dynamic. It was, you showed no weakness, no chinks in the armor. Everything was fine.
Mystique
Everything's
of the pastor.
Oh yeah, that you're walking on clouds and floating down the hallway, and having coffee with angels in the break room. That is unrealistic, and it was incredibly unhealthy, especially in our movement, because it set us up and set those guys up for incredible moral failures.
Right.
Because it was like, well, you reach this apex of Christian perfection, and then boom, here comes the reality that we're human.
Right.
And so my school of leadership coming up was not functional at all, and I had to actually unlearn a lot of really bad leadership habits.
Right.
I was told by a minister early on that there's no such thing as burnout. If you're walking in the Spirit, you're not going to burn out. I mean, hey, this was a spiritual father to me. So what do you do when spiritual fathers download all this wisdom to you? You apply it to yourself. Oh, well, okay, if I'm walking in the Spirit, I'm not going to burn out.
And just think of how destructive that is.
Oh, my
If you're
goodness.
walking in the Spirit, you won't burn out. So if I burn out, not only am I shredded, but now I have the sense of failure that I wasn't spiritual enough, that I wasn't godly enough.
What did I do wrong? What
Yeah.
did I do wrong, God,
Right.
to suffer this form of judgment? Was I not holy enough? Did I not
Right.
pray enough? And so, there's this. It was a minefield,
Right.
of issues, and that I had to unlearn. And when I hit clinical burnout in 2019 and diagnosed by a doctor, and I had those very things
Right.
because I just, for the duration of my ministry, hey man, there's a job that needs to be done. Well, I'll tackle it. I'm going to get it done. And there's a get it done mentality that helps you, but when it's born out of that dysfunctional leadership mindset, and let me tell, because I am Gen X and I've still got some boomers out there that are my friends, I will say this, the guilty will remain anonymous and the innocent will also remain anonymous, but I would say that at that same time, what I have learned the hard way, I would love for my brothers and sisters to learn the easy way.
Right.
And that is, we're not bulletproof.
Right.
Okay, we're flawed human beings who are dependent on a gracious and loving God. And so if we don't lean into that, now that can become a crutch. Okay. And we lead with our imperfections in on blast. Can't do that. Like you said earlier, there's a middle ground to be found. And in episode 2, we'll talk a little bit about finding that. But there's a happy medium to be found in being a determined, strong leader, and at the same time understanding that we all are flawed, vulnerable creatures.
Yeah.
And so we don't set those unrealistic expectations of leadership that, I'm this shining example. And that's one of the things that the pastor wrote is
Right.
that I'm this unrealistic expectation of God's perfected work on earth.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case.
Yeah. Yeah, and I so appreciate you sharing that. I experienced something similar myself. I remember sitting at the table with the board of the church that I was pastoring, and I said these words. I said, I can't do this. I said, I cannot do this because of anxiety I was feeling, persistent depression, and some stuff that was happening in our family with our kids at that point, and just the predictable pressures of ministry. It all felt so heavy to me. I was like, I'm out. I can't do this. Wow. Thankfully, I had a church board that said, hey, you don't have to do this.
Yes.
What can we take so that you can have
Yes.
space to care for yourself, care for your family, get help that you need?
Yes.
You need to stay. Let us pick up some of this. And that was such a gift. But I had to realize, you know what? We all have a finite capacity emotionally,
Yes.
right? And at some point, we're all tapping out, right? Are we going to quit at that point? Or are we going to say, okay, I'm tapping out of doing it the way I'm doing it this way,
Yes.
and I'm going to get some help so that I can rally
Yep.
and turn back toward my calling, but do it in a healthier way.
Tim, and let me segue off what you just said about a board that saw that and reacted in a positive, affirming way. And so, if you're a board member or you're on a leadership team and you're listening to this or watching, I want you to know that what Tim is describing is a gift
Yeah.
to a spiritual leader.
Yep.
For a board to say, hey, listen, all right, wait, you're being vulnerable with us, you're being open with us. What can we do to assist you?
Yeah.
Like we don't expect you to carry all the burden
Right.
on your own. And then you've got all these contributing circumstances with family and all this other stuff. And so having a staff or
Yeah.
a board to come alongside you and say, hey, Pastor, listen, we're here, we want to help, and we understand, and we already do that anyway with one directional when you as the pastor are seeing board members and our leadership team struggling. It's already natural to you to reach out and say, hey, what can I do to help? You know, I love you. I'm the shepherd of the house, and I want to help. But boy, how refreshing it was for you in that situation. And even for me here in the office, the presbytery has just been so incredibly good and gracious to me, seeing that we're running at a high speed. We got a lot of things that we're trying to do, and just to come alongside and say, hey, listen, you know what? Let's pump the brakes a little bit. Let's build you some margin.
Yeah.
Okay, let's build you some margin and try to get you some help. And so I'm thankful for your board there.
Yeah.
Man, what a gift.
And can I say this? Of our 192 or so churches in our district, about 40 to 50 of those are what we call district affiliated churches.
Yes.
For whom, because of where they're at in their development as a church, the district serves as their board.
Yes.
We want to say to you, Pastor, if you're
Absolutely.
feeling weary,
Absolutely.
be vulnerable with us and share that
Yes.
with us. We don't want to get that call that I'm done because you pushed beyond your limits to the point where there's really no.
We've gotten those calls.
Right.
Yeah.
We want you to call us. Hey, if you're struggling, you're discouraged, call us and say, hey, I need some help. I need a breather. I need, right. And
Yes.
invite us into what it is that you're experiencing and you're feeling, because we don't want you to quit either. And because you don't have a classic board, as many would understand it, the
Right.
district is serving as that board.
Yep.
Reach out to us here at the district office. You have our phone numbers. We're very good about providing that contact information. If you don't have it, call, we'll give it to you. But we want you to be able to reach out if you're struggling.
Yes, thank you. And we're available. And all of our credential ministers, staff, churches, all those, just even congregants, we pray for you.
Yeah.
We cover you in prayer. We desire the same things you desire, which is to be a vibrant, life-giving congregation in your community.
Yeah.
We want to see other communities experience that as well. And we've got, Tim, we got some great things going on
for
across
sure.
Georgia.
Yep.
So I know that we have a tendency, just because of the nature of our jobs, that we deal with issues and problems at different times. But we want to change the narrative about what we talk about. Just in here, even in our presbytery meetings, we open those meetings up with, here's what's going on. Great. Take a minute or two and tell us about the incredible things that are going on.
Right.
I think there's enough negative talk in America right now with all the things. You turn on the news.
I haven't noticed. Is that true?
I know,
There's a lot of
right? Yeah,
negativity?
exactly. You turn on the news, and 15 minutes later, your anxiety level is peaking.
Right.
And so all the negative stuff that's going on. Let's also not neglect talking about the good things. The
sure.
churches that are doing incredible things in communities. Just recently, I celebrated a 10-year anniversary with a pastor that's a true revitalization.
Yeah.
He went in, there was nothing there.
Yeah.
10 years later, growing, vibrant community of believers, and they're having inroads in their community. And just on that scale, but then also on much larger scales as well. We want to talk about the things that are going great. So pastors want you to know, if you're in need, especially as a DCA congregation, you need to reach out to us.
And can I jump in there
Yeah,
for a second?
please.
I want to say that something great is happening at your church. You and I have the opportunity to travel to
Yes.
all of our churches
Yes.
every weekend.
Yes.
And often the pastor feels like nothing good's happening here for a couple of reasons. First of all, they're just discouraged. Secondly,
Yeah.
they feel like they're suffering by comparison to what's happening out there. And maybe there's been some conflict or some negativity from church members. And when you're in that place, it can be hard to see the great things that are happening.
Yes.
And often, I'm sure you do the same. When you come into a church, you go, man, I love this. And that is so
Yes.
great. What a blessing you have. And they go, really? And so we want to
Right.
say, pastors, great things are happening at your church. It
Absolutely.
may be hard to see right now, but
Absolutely.
there are. And we want to celebrate those things.
Yes, and you know, you've seen it so many times, you don't see it anymore. And so we come and visit, and man, you've got an incredible idea that you're executing in your church, and it's doing great. And it's like,
Serving your community in
oh my
unique
goodness,
ways.
yeah. It's like, hey, high five, man.
Right.
And so you may not be receiving that from the community or the congregation, or like you said, when we get discouraged, we see everything through that lens. Mm-hmm. Everything through that lens, it's all cloudy and murky.
Right.
And so we want to celebrate what God is doing. And
Yep.
for smaller congregations and larger congregations across the board, a win is a win.
Yep.
A soul is a soul. A water baptism is water baptism. A Holy Spirit baptism is a Holy Spirit baptism.
Yep.
And so we celebrate that. That is a win for the kingdom.
Yeah.
Regardless of size. Stop comparing yourself to churches of different sizes in different communities. Let's compare ourselves to what God has called us to do, and that is to win the lost, baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and to impart the power of the Holy Spirit in the life of the believer. Yeah.
I was at one of our smaller churches not long ago on a Sunday morning, and they had probably 30, 35 people there, and they baptized 7 people. And I'm like,
Come on.
what megachurch is baptizing 30%, 25
I
to
know.
30% of their congregation,
Yes,
right? And
yes.
I said, do you see what's happening
Yes,
here? God is
yes.
doing something really special,
yes.
and something that we want to celebrate and applaud.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Tim, thank you for joining me on,
Hey, my
on
pleasure.
our very first episode. And we're going to be producing these. We'll be filming multiple episodes, but we'll be releasing them at different times. And then I also want to offer you this opportunity. If there is a topic out there that you would like for us to have a conversation about, or if there's an individual that you feel like is doing a good job in their community, there's a pastor or staff pastor that you feel like is really just knocking it out of the park, would you reach out to us?
Right.
I mean, we're very accessible. You can go to the website, and we've got all of our email addresses there, but I think most everyone knows how to get in touch with us. But throw it out there and say, hey, listen, I've got a brother over here in this community that's just doing an awesome job, and I want to brag on him. You guys really need to talk to him. We want to do that.
Yeah.
Again, the goal is to shorten the distance between the district office and the local credential minister. And so we want to have those conversations.
And we want to thank our producer, Philip Stanley,
Yeah,
who's just
thank you,
across
Philip.
the room
Yes,
from us.
yes.
And we want to say, Philip will probably put that contact information up on the screen for him.
Absolutely.
So that they
Absolutely.
will have easy access to
Thank
that.
you. All right. Hey, we love you. We're praying for you, and we'll see you next time.